Now, the way that the Yukon software is linked to the SC4 is by the name that is actually assigned to the SC4. And I want to demonstrate to you when you bring up your Yukon data store and you're in your current data store that you're going to build and work from, there are two locations on the right side of the screen that show up in this system view. If you look down here on the bottom left, the system tab is the one that we're selected on. And these two areas on the right, you have the upper right section, which is called Add New Device. The lower section is active devices that are on the local network. Now, everything that is out there as far as the naming system goes with Yukon will be found. So SC4s and control panels are what you'll see down here. And up in the Add New Device section, in this version of the Yukon that we're demonstrating, the master devices are not functional and not to be used with this system. This is strictly SC4 and control panels. Now, you can add by just left-clicking on an SC4 here, and it brings up this Add Device to System. We can add it right here if we'd like, and then give it a name that we want to assign to the SC4 at this time. So we could just call this KUSI-SC4 if we'd like, or you can give it your call letters or just SC4 or anything that you prefer for this icon to show when it appears on the screen. Now, something important to note here is that this name cannot have spaces in between any of the acronyms or any names that you're going to put on here. You can have an underscore or a dash, a hyphen, but no spaces, because it looks at that as a space and it will drop the last part of that when we try to name it from our TeraTerm application. So if we say OK at this point, then we'll now see that icon appear on the screen, and you'll notice that there's a red box around it. Now, that red box indicates that there is no communications between this device and this software application, this Yukon application. So either the SC4 that we've just created does not have the Ethernet connected to it, and also running over to this, it may not have the right IP address in it, which would then link to this same subnet, or this name that I've given it, KUSI-SC4, does not exist in that SC4 that I've created. Now, that's one way that you can bring this onto the screen, but regardless, and I'm going to demonstrate to you how we give a name to an SC4 in just a moment, but regardless of how I bring an SC4 on the screen here this way, if this does not already have this name in your SC4, it will have a red box around it. So this name is very crucial to how we now go out and name this in our SC4. Now you'll notice down here in the lower right section that I have an item that's called SC4 Revision 02. This is going to show all of the SC4s that happen to be on my .4 network out there. These are just individual engineering applications, some demo applications, and there's one right here that I have connected to this system that we've been showing this demonstration thus far on, and it's called KUSI-SC401. I named it here exactly like the USI folder had, and I physically gave it that name, and that's the reason that this name here will not work. So let me demonstrate to you how to rename this SC401 so that it will show up without a red box on here, and it will give us the proper connection down here so that it'll show on the active or on the local network as an active device with the name SC4 and no 01. Now, in order to do this, in this particular version of the Yukon software, we are not able to rename this from this location. So you can either leave the name that this shows up with down here and delete this icon, so let's do it this way to begin with. So if I wanted to use the current name that's in my SC4 right now and bring it onto the screen here, then I would start by not adding a device over here, an SC4. So let's begin again by just reopening our current data store view. Okay, and it will, we're already in this view, so we have to close this view. Well, let's do this in reverse of that, so that it's a little bit more complicated. I want to show you how to delete a device down the road here, but we'll talk about that later. Let's start in reverse order. So if I want to rename this SC4 and I can't do it from here, then the only way that we have available to do this is from the terminal program called TeraTerm. So if you come down here to your start program, you should already have this on your system. If not, you need to go to that install 2020 CD and run the PC prep, and that will install TeraTerm and NFS Server on your system. But TeraTerm's already a shortcut on my system, so if I click on TeraTerm, and if you already have this defaulted to show the TCP connection of your SC4, and then click OK, it will automatically take us to that diagnostics telnet session with the SC4. If you don't know your SC4 and that has not been set up yet, you can go to the serial setup or the serial port and connect in through the COM port on the back of the SC4 and into your computer. I'm sorry, the COM port on the back of your computer and into the front port on the SC4's little RJ45 connector. And you would plug that into that diagnostics port on the active SC4 card. And the active SC4 card is the one with the Ethernet lights blinking. If you have Ethernet connected, if you don't, it's the one that has the active LED and the most of the LEDs will be lit on it in comparison with the backup. So that will be your active card. If you do opt to go through the serial port, you will need to put in place the RJ45 to 9-pin adapter with a label on it that says SC4/2020. That is a custom adapter that we've sent out. It's just pinned out specifically for the SC4 and the 2020 application. So if you're going to use that, then that needs to be in place with a straight Cat5 cable going from it over to the SC4. But we're going to, for this demonstration, show you this through a TCP connection. So if we say OK here, it'll bring you to a command shell prompt. And if you just hit enter, it'll just take you to another prompt each time. Now, there are other tutorials that will show you the entire command structure for an SC4, and this is not the time that we're going to show that. All I'm going to demonstrate here is how to rename an SC4. So at the prompt, there is a command if you type that's called chassis, followed by a space, and then then a hyphen, and then the letter R. And that reads back what's currently in the chassis setup. So if we hit return, this will show us a few things. One of them happens to be the name. So if you look at where it says chassis ID, that is the name that you'll notice down here in our right side that's currently assigned to our SC4. Well, we want that name to change so that it does not have a 01 at the end. And in order to do that, if you type in the word chassis with us and then just press return, you'll see all of the operations that are available with that chassis command. And slide this up a little bit so you can see it. We'll do it one more time here. So chassis, enter, and you'll see all of the commands that go with the chassis, or all of the operations that go with the chassis command. So the one that we're looking for is the chassis ID, this -CHID, and that is changing the chassis ID. Now, the chassis is where the IP address exists, and is also where the name is sent through and stored. And then the cards know how to use that specific name and IP address. So for changing the name, you would type in the word chassis again, and you'll notice up here, here's the command structure. So you would type in chassis space, the option space, followed by your file name or command that you're going to do. So it's chassis space, then remember our operation is -CHID for chassis ID, then a space, and then the new name. And this is case sensitive. It's exactly like you have it typed on your SC4 icon on Yukon, the Yukon system screen. So this needs to say KUSI in capitals with an SC4. We're not going to add the 01 at the end because it's already what's in there. Now if we hit return, this will go out and reprogram the chassis name. And we can look at that again here if we just type in, and this is all case sensitive as well, the chassis -R is the display, and we'll see that that name is now KUSI-SC4. Now, for that to take effect on your system, what you'll need to do is reset your SC4 control card. Now, the proper way to do that with two SC4s installed is not to just press the SC4 or the reset button on the SC4 that's active, because that will reset the card and change you over to the backup card, which has not had time to write the information back to it, so you will then be back to your original name. So what you'll need to do is press and hold both reset buttons on the cards. So there's a reset button on the backup and on the active card. Press and hold both of those, and then let go of the active card's reset button first, and then a second or two later let go of the backup card's reset button. That will then come up on the same card that we're currently on. Okay, if you're running with just one card, then you can just press the SC4 reset button on that specific card. Or if you're running on a telenet session such as I am here, there is a command called SC4 reset. And then if you press return, it will go out and reset that single SC4 card. Now I'm going to go ahead and close my TeraTerm, and you'll notice that when this comes back, that my SC401 has now fallen off of the network. It's no longer existing here, and you'll see the new name when it does re-register that as KUSI-SC4. And you'll notice that the names now match, and there is no longer a red box around the device. Now, when you're naming an SC4 in this fashion, where you build it brand new, adding a new device, remember, this application is not a retrieval application, so it will not come down here. Even though it found the SC4, it does not grab the source and destinations and mapping table from down here and place it on the screen. It simply just adds this new icon, which will be blank, with the name associated to that SC4, no matter what exists in the SC4. And I'll show you this by right-clicking on, using your right clicker on your mouse, right on the icon, you'll see a menu item that drops down here. Now this menu item will be the same for every device that ends up on your system. And if you press the left click and press the config button, you'll notice that the table that appears on here has blank information everywhere. Zeros on the properties, and the levels are all blank. And again, let me see if I can explain that one more time. When you add a new device from up here, it's just adding and editing an icon called the SC4. That's all it's doing. All we've done is renamed the SC4 chassis down here from the TeraTerm application so that the names will match and the red box will go away. Until the red box goes away, you'll never be able to reprogram whatever you do design inside of this SC4 icon. So keep that in mind when you're building this. Now, make the name what you want it to be right now, because it's the best time to do this. Something that you don't think you'll ever need to change in the future. Now, the next release of our Yukon software, you'll be able to rename these directly here in the software. But in this application, version 3.5.7 and older, you will need to do this in the fashion that I've just shown you. Now, another way that you can perform this is, let's go ahead and right-click on this device, and we're going to delete it. So let's just delete this, and I'll take you back to the beginning. So if we click on Delete Device, it brings up a box that asks you if you want to delete it from the document only or from the data store. We're going to take it out of the entire data store because we don't want to save this. We want to redo this in our own fashion. So let's go ahead and click on From the Data Store also. And another way that you can bring this onto the screen instead of adding a new device is, as soon as you plug your SC4 in, as you noticed earlier, I had mine show up down here as a KUSI-SC401. Now we've renamed it, and it shows up as a KUSI-SC4 on our blank system screen. So if I want to just add this so that I don't have to name it up here and hope that it names properly, and go name it according to what comes up down here from the TeraTerm, you can just simply left-click on this KUSI down here and add that to the system, and it will just add the icon directly on the system. And that's the easier way to do this, and that's the recommended way to do this. So if you already have an existing SC4, you'll click on it down there, add it, and you don't have to come up here and add a brand new one. The only difference in the two is the fact that if you do it up here from the add new device, you'll have to give it a name, and then you'll have to go and make sure the name is exactly the same as this. That's the only difference. If the name's not the same, you'll have to go out to TeraTerm and rename it. Okay, but right-clicking it and looking at the config, again, it's going to be completely blank. Okay, so keeping that in mind, that is how you'll name an SC4 for your maybe the beginning of your system. And now next, what I'll describe to you is a third option that you have of bringing in an existing SC4. So let's go ahead and act as if it was a beginning session here again. So go ahead and delete the device from the data store so it's completely removed. And there is one other way, and you recall in our previous tutorial on retrieving an SC4 config file, another way that you can do this is by clicking on File, going down to where it says Import SC4 config file, click on this, then you're going to navigate to the C drive, to the USI folder. We're going to go into our KUSI SC401 that we did the install 2020 from, and remember the encode folder where we ran the get encode batch file, and then there's our brand new KUSI SC401 config file, and that's the type of a file that needs to be brought in here. So if we click OK at this point, it's going to ask us for the name. Now this name that it wants is the same system name that we see down here. It's already been named in our SC4, and remember it is case sensitive. So KUSI-SC4. And then when we say OK, sure enough, the red box will go away. The name is the same, only this time, because it already has the information that we need. If we right-click, go to Configure, you'll see the mapping tables and the properties already in a pre-built SC4, of which you can then go and edit. If we click OK here, you'll then see some sources and some destinations on our screen, already pre-built. This is one from another existing SC4. Now, if you know that that SC4 that you're using right now already has an existing table that you'd like to use, and most likely it will not because you will be building your own. If it does have one, it would have come from Utah Scientific already configured because you would have already given us the programming to put into that. Then you'd already have a data store created and everything, so you wouldn't have to do this. But for demonstration purposes here, that is how you would retrieve or how you would take an existing config file that's already been retrieved in the USI folder and import that into this system. Now, one other important note here is if you've ever lost an SC4 or something's corrupted in your data store, you can then go back out to USI, do that get encode to retrieve the config file, and then come back up here again and perform this file and import. Now, if we press this with an already existing SC4 on the screen, it will not let us do this. It'll come up and say that one can only be added if there is not an SC4 already defined. So you would then have to go ahead and delete this. So right-click it, delete it from the data store, and then go ahead and perform your file import function again. Okay, so that concludes how to name an SC4 for your system. In the next tutorial, we'll talk about creating your data store for your current system.